Please don't shoot the messenger just because you dislike the message. I didn't create the economic or political conditions we now face as a nation, but I won't sugarcoat them either. My guess is that deep down, you already know what I'm about to say. So instead of avoiding it, let's take a hard look at where we are, especially from an economic standpoint, which is the heart of our current crisis. Unfortunately, Americans remain dangerously uninformed about the realities of our economy. I genuinely believe we're standing at a major crossroads, not just for the United States, but for the world. And while I don't usually speak in grandiose terms, the gravity of the moment demands it. Let me explain why this era marks such a pivotal turning point. For most of the past 50 years, roughly since 1970, the global economy, with the US as its leading force, has been shaped by a model known as neoliberal globalization. This was the era of Reagan and Thatcher, a period when governments around the world, ours included, began turning away from the lessons of the New Deal. They abandoned the idea that capitalism, left unchecked, needed government oversight to remain humane and livable for the masses. Remember what the New Deal gave us: Social Security, a federal minimum wage, unemployment insurance, all unprecedented at the time. The government directly employed 15 million Americans. It was a massive intervention aimed at giving capitalism a human face. And how was it funded? By taxing corporations and the wealthy. Heavily. For anyone who claims we can't tax the rich today, remember, we've already done it. And the man who did it, Franklin D. Roosevelt, was elected 3 times, making him the most successful and popular president in U.S. history. But beginning in the 1970s, as memories of the New Deal faded, a concerted effort to dismantle it began. Reagan and Thatcher led the charge, but they weren't alone. Both Republicans and Democrats jumped on board, pushing to shrink the role of government and let capitalism run unchecked. Regulation was rolled back. Corporate America was unleashed. And where did it go? To China, where profits were high, wages were low, and markets were expanding. American business schools had trained their graduates to chase profit wherever it led. I know I taught in those schools. And the place offering the biggest returns in the late 20th century was the People's Republic of China. Corporations from the US, UK, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, they all rushed in, welcomed with open arms. Over the next 40 to 50 years, China's economy surged. It adopted a hybrid model, half private capitalist firms, half state-owned enterprises, unlike anything seen before. And under that model, China experienced the fastest sustained economic growth in world history, averaging 6 to 9% annually for 3 decades. Meanwhile, the U.S. economy lumbered along at just 2 to 3% growth. It doesn't take a genius to see what this means. At that rate, China caught up. Today, for the first time in a century, the U.S. has a genuine economic competitor, strong, innovative, and capable of outperforming us across the board. And yet, we're in denial. My wife, a psychotherapist, calls it what it is: a refusal to acknowledge reality. Like a toddler hiding behind their hands to block out a barking dog, many Americans comfort themselves with the illusion that if we don't see China's rise, it isn't real. But it is real. China isn't going anywhere, and it's still growing. In 2024, according to the International Monetary Fund, China's projected growth is 4.8%. The US? Just 2.8%. India? A staggering 7%. So the next time a politician tells you that America's economy is leading the world, remember that toddler with their hands over their eyes. China has also built global alliances that challenge the post-World War II dominance of the U.S. One of the most important is BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. More nations have joined, and together, this coalition now represents over half the world's population and produces more than the U.S. and its traditional allies in the G7. Every country and every business is now reassessing its global strategy. We're witnessing the end of the American Empire, the successor to the British Empire. It's over. And it won't be coming back. This truth should have been front and center in the last presidential election, but both parties preferred to pretend otherwise. Look at Ukraine. When the war began in 2022, President Biden and his administration told us Russia would collapse under sanctions. The ruble would plummet. Europe would unite behind Ukraine. None of that happened. Instead, Russia simply redirected its energy exports to China and India. Result? Russia is now growing faster than the US. This is what happens when you ignore reality. Throughout history, empires rise and fall. The ascent is thrilling. The descent is brutal. We're now on the downward slope. And the wealthy elites in America are doing what elites always do in declining empires, offloading the costs onto the rest of us. Look at inflation. That's how living standards are quietly slashed. $6 eggs? You felt that? So did every middle and working class American. The minimum wage? Still $7.25 an hour, unchanged since 2009, while prices have soared. That's not policy, it's economic cruelty. Real wages for American workers have been stagnant for 30 to 40 years. Meanwhile, in China, real wages have quadrupled. That's why the Chinese government is secure. That's why their people support them. And that's why the US is slipping deeper into inequality, division, and frustration. Back in the mid-20th century, America was more equal than Europe. Today, we're more unequal than every European nation. Why? Because corporations moved jobs overseas and pocketed the profits, leaving the rest of us behind. This inequality, coupled with inflation and stagnation, helped bring Trump to power. His messaging, though hollow, economically resonated emotionally. He positioned himself as a protector, promising steel walls against immigrants and tariff walls against China. It was simple, powerful, and false. His economic policies were incoherent. But the public's fear was real. And while the US continued its economic war against China, started under Obama, maintained under Biden, it failed. China kept growing. The BRICS alliance kept expanding. And America kept pretending. Just like the British Empire eventually gave way to American dominance, we now face a choice: continue our denial, or accept the changing world and work out a new arrangement. Will we acknowledge the decline of American power and seek peaceful coexistence with a rising China? Or will we risk conflict despite both sides possessing nuclear weapons? The world is undergoing fundamental change. We can no longer act as if it's 1965 and we're still calling all the shots. The war in Ukraine is effectively lost. The war in Gaza isolates us. And Europe? It's collapsing economically, largely because it lost access to Russian energy and can't compete in Chinese markets anymore. This is the reality. And while it's uncomfortable, it's better to face it now than pay a greater price later. Our empire is fading. The future may belong to China or to a new global coalition. But pretending otherwise is no longer an option. So if I've made you uncomfortable, I apologize. But I'd rather speak the truth than soothe you with illusions. The war on China failed. The US response has failed. And the consequences will continue unless we stop pretending and start planning for what's next.